So last time I left you on a bit of a cliffhanger because at the end of my reading wrap up for January I had just finished part 1 of a duet. The good news is that today I'm kicking off with part 2 of the duet, so you don't have to wait any longer to hear what I have to say about both of those books. Before I jump into that though, I just want to give you my stats for February. So in total I read 13 books last month, which came to 5,244 pages, which averaged out at about 187 pages per day. So that's slightly higher than my average. I usually average about 160 pages a day, so I did pretty well in February despite only reading 13 books this month. I also had a really great reading month from a star rating perspective. So in total I had 1 3.5-star read, 5 4 stars, 5 4.5 stars and 2 5-star reads. 2 of the books that I read I actually listened to as audiobooks, 3 were ebooks that I actually purchased, and then 8 were on KU. And then in terms of the subgenres, I had 2 billionaire romances, 1 contemporary, 3 dark, 1 historical, 4 mafia, 1 paranormal and 1 sports romance as well. So with the stats out of the way, we can jump straight in to The Wildflower by J L Beck. And this is the first book I finished in the month of February, and it was book 2 of the Oakmount Elite series, and it was also part 2 of a duet. So The Wildflower was book 1, and The Wildflower finished off this story, which was a dark romance between Drew and Mabel. So this one was in an academic setting. They were at college. Our main hero, Drew, he was very much a bully towards our heroine, but he was also kind of damaged. And alongside that, he was very obsessed and possessive about our heroine. So just as a recap then, in terms of what The Wildflower was all about, well, basically Mabel as our heroine, she was kind of a bookworm. She was very academic. She liked to spend a lot of time in the library. And in addition to that, her mother was quite sick and she needed support with medical care. So she's one of those sorts of heroines who is sort of very timid and shy, very caring and kind, very, very intelligent, but not particularly popular, and never expected really to run into the likes of Drew. Because Drew is the counter opposite of her personality. He is, you know, comes from a wealthy family. He's got a very abusive father. As a result, he, you know, is very unkind, uncaring, very much a bully. And he's sort of in this sort of secret society, not strictly as a secret society, but in this sort of club at college. And they kind of have like an initiation process. And part of this club, they kind of organise what they call the hunt. And the hunt is basically where they invite pretty much women, mainly women, to come along, run through the woods. The idea is if that you make it to a cabin, which is about 6 kilometres away from the starting point, you will win $25,000. But no one has ever reached it, because what the real intention is the people from this sort of club will chase after you, and therefore anything goes. So once they catch up with you, they basically can pretty much do whatever they want with you. And so Mabel very much attracts the attention of Drew, and Drew engineers it so that Mabel ends up in this hunt, and of course he is the one that's going to hunt her down. And she's a virgin heroine as well, so of course he's going to take her virginity, and that's kind of where their romance starts. Now this duet is very twisty-turny from a plot perspective. There's kind of a lot going on with the families. Drew has got a close friendship circle. There's kind of 4 boys in total, 4 men in total that are part of this friendship group, and they're kind of all come from either very powerful, rich families, or I would say mafia adjacent, because definitely they are into some form of criminal activity. And in particular, Drew's friend Sebastian definitely seems to be part of a criminal family, and Drew's father himself is kind of the money man. He's the financial person that kind of looks after the investments and potentially money laundering and that sort of thing as well. So these guys are pretty powerful. But like I said, Drew's father was sort of very abusive towards Drew, and he's very much holding his mother over his head, because Drew's mother is also very sick, and the father uses her as leverage against Drew so that he can really control him, because he kind of threatens to withdraw his mum's treatment if Drew doesn't fall in line. So there's quite a lot going on in this book from a twisty-turny perspective, and you know, Drew is that very archetypical kind of hero in a dark sort of romance where he starts off very dark, very brooding, very much a bully, doesn't treat the heroine very well, but as he gets to know her, he obviously then starts to develop feelings for her, and then he's going to very much become very possessive and protective of her, and ultimately try and, you know, shield her from kind of what's going on with the rest of his life. So book 1 does end very much on a cliffhanger, lots of secrets are revealed, and then book 2 is very much working through how they are going to overcome the obstacles that have been put in front of them, try and figure out if they can be together as a couple and how that is going to play out. Overall, I rated this particular book 4 stars. The first book was a 4-star as well. I think it was a very solid start to this series. However, why I didn't give this one any more than 4 stars was for 2 main reasons. One, because I never fully warmed to Drew's character. He never fully won me over. And the second thing is, I just felt this duet was just too long. It really didn't need to be 2 books, and collectively both books were actually quite fairly substantial in length, and therefore collectively it was a very long duet. And I did feel that book 2 was drawn out in some places, and it could have been tightened up quite a lot more in the storyline. Now, I am very interested in the next book in the series, because the next 2 books is another duet about the same couple, and it's going to feature Sebastian, who we learned quite a lot about in this particular duet, and I am very intrigued about him and his character. However, the fact that it's another duet does put me off from reading it, so I'm not sure how soon I'm going to get to it, but it will remain on my TBR and I will pick it up at some point. So after that, I finished listening to Wicked Deeds on a Winter's Night by Kresley Cole, and this is book 4 in the Immortals After Dark series. Now, I listened to this one as an audiobook, and it was narrated, as all of them are, I believe, by Robert Petkov. Now, I'm reading this series as part of the Immortals After Dark read-along that Amber from Amber Reads Romance is organising, and we need to basically read 2 books per month, but I'd already read the first 3 books of this series, so for February I just needed to pick up this one, which was book 4. Now, this one is a paranormal romance between a witch and a werewolf. There's an age gap between these 2. There's a damaged, tortured hero. They're very much enemies to lovers, but also fated mates, and we were following Bowen and Mary. So we'd seen both of these characters in the previous book, because the previous book was really set around this immortal paranormal competition called the Khai, and all of the different paranormal groups would put forward a champion in order to win a prize, and they had to go through a number of kind of trials in order to score points so that they could win this prize. So the prize for this one is a key, which would give you 2 chances to go back in time, and this is why Bowen, who is our hero, has entered this competition. Bowen is a werewolf. He's been around for about 1200 years, and he is a very tortured hero because he found his fated mate about 1,000 years before, but unfortunately she died, and Bowen very much blames himself for her death. And so he's desperate to win this competition so he can get the key, because his plan is to go back in time to save his mate. Now, normally werewolves only mate once, they never mate again, and not only that, if they lose their mate, they usually are drawn to unalive themselves because they can't bear to be without their mate. But Bowen is very different. He's very, very tortured. He's very, very grumpy. He's been, you know, very difficult to live with, shall we say, over the last 1,000 years, but he has been doggedly determined to continue and find a way to bring his fated mate back. And so this is his one opportunity. The thing is, Mary is a young witch. She is literally just coming of age, and while she is prophesied to be very, very powerful, she is still struggling to actually even control her power. In addition to that, she hasn't fully turned into an immortal being, so her, you know, mortality is going to be a problem for her in this competition. But she is there on behalf of the witches to try and get this key, and she's doesn't need to go back in time for any particular reason, but she wants to get the key because she wants to prove her value to her coven, because to date she's felt pretty useless because she's not been able to control her power. Now, like I say, we saw this couple in book 3, and now in book 4 they've finally got their story together, and essentially this starts out where they're still part of the competition, and they've kind of temporarily teamed up to get a particular item that they both need to score some points. But during this kind of encounter, when they're kind of working together, Bowen starts to have feelings towards Mary, and he can't understand why this would be, because he shouldn't have feelings for another person because he's only supposed to have one mate. And therefore he concludes that Mary must have bewitched him and deliberately put a spell on him in order to make him believe that she is his mate. Now, there's also another kind of prophecy that if somebody saw what Mary really looked like, then she would be claimed by her mate, and therefore this would somehow disrupt her potential to be this very, very powerful witch. So she actually kind of disguises herself. She wears a glamour and also kind of wears this sort of cloak with a hood, so that really she is really trying to protect herself from a paranormal sort of creature seeing her. Now, during this competition, her glamour sort of drops, and this is when Bowen really gets a glimpse of her. And so when he's so adamant that she's bewitched him, she cannot say either way whether she has or not, because she can't control her powers. She doesn't know if she's done this deliberately, and because her glamour is dropped, she doesn't know if this is somehow responsible for what's gone on. Now, because of this, Bowen is really, really angry with Mary, and when this part of the competition sort of ends, he traps her in this sort of cave system with another group of paranormal creatures, some demons and some fae, and he kind of leaves her in there. Now, he very much believes that she's got the power to get herself out, so he doesn't feel too guilty about it. But just as he's leaving and kind of sealing them into this sort of like tomb area, she does indeed curse him, and now she's cursed Bowen to lose his immortality, and so he can now get injured and he can't regenerate. So he then carries on with the competition, but as a result he gets weaker and weaker and weaker because he gets more and more injured and he can't regenerate, and as a result of this he ends up losing the competition and doesn't win the key. And therefore now he is absolutely livid with Mary, because he very much believes that she's responsible for the fact that he lost this competition. The thing is, the witches are not happy that one of their own has been trapped in this tomb, and only Bowen knows where it is. And so after the competition has ended, they force Bowen to go back and rescue her from this tomb, and he does so very begrudgingly, but also he feels this great pull towards her because he still gets a sense that she's his mate, but still believes is very much part of this spell. So then the next part of the story is where he goes back to rescue her, also rescues the other paranormal creatures that were trapped in the tomb with her, and they have to kind of make their way to safety. And through this period, that is when Mary and Bowen spend more time together. They actually spend some alone time together, and they start to try and unravel and uncover what's actually happened and how he can have been bewitched by her, believing that she is his mate. Now, overall, I really, really did enjoy this one. This is my favourite of the series so far, and I rated it 4 stars, and it was 2.5 on the Spy scale. Next up then, we've got Empire of Temptation by Mila Finelli. This is book 1 in her new series, which is New York State of Mafia. I absolutely loved her Kings of Italy series, and I raced through that series because I wanted to get to this one because it was a new release in January, and it didn't disappoint. It wasn't quite as good as some of the books from the Kings of Italy series, but it's definitely a really solid start to this next series. So of course then that means that this is a mafia romance. It's an Italian Don in this one, and it's mainly set in New York. We've got an age gap, hidden identity, virgin heroine, and we were following Luca and Valentina. So this is a bit of a complex plot at the start of this book, but essentially what happens is that Luca's cousin is captured by the police, and they are going to try and make him talk because the police really want to obviously take Luca down, send him to prison for his wrongdoings, because at the end of the day he is a mafia don. Now he's really worried that his cousin is going to eventually give away some trade secrets and that he might be in trouble. So another Italian sort of don comes to Luca and says, I think I can help you out here, because the sort of chief of police, this commissioner dude, his daughter was previously unalived by a mafia assassin. This assassin is gone into hiding, But if you can lure him out of hiding, you'll be able to exchange this man for your cousin, and therefore you'll be able to prevent him telling any of your secrets. So Luca is now in this weird situation where he has now got to go to New York to find this assassin's daughter so that he can lure the assassin out of hiding and take him back to Italy and basically do this deal with the commissioner. So this is kind of like the setup for the part of this story. Now when he gets to New York and finds our heroine, who is Valentina, she is actually a struggling restaurant owner. She is actually estranged from her father, hasn't seen him in a very long time, but she is the owner of an Italian restaurant that is not doing very well at all. So Luca is very intrigued by her, and he decides instead of kidnapping her straight away, he is going to hang around and see if he can lure the assassin out. And he kind of takes pity on her and decides he's going to help her with the restaurant, and he pulls in some favours and gets a very good Italian chef and a maitre d' to come and start working at this restaurant, and together they start to turn things around. Now, Valentina's a very interesting sort of character because she's very headstrong. She really wants to do everything by herself. She absolutely loves this restaurant because it was handed down to her by her parents, and she really wants it to do well. But she also doesn't want to be bossed around by Luca because she really wants to do these things for herself. Still, he's not going to let her do it alone, and she's pretty much forced into letting him help. And of course they are going to be in close proximity together. He decides he's going to stay close by to where she is for the foreseeable, because the more he gets to know her, the more he starts to really like her, and he doesn't want to kidnap her, and he's really hoping he can resolve this issue or what is going on before he has to kind of make a move. Of course, so they're going to get very close together and their relationship is going to start from there. But he is going to come unstuck a little bit when she finds out why he's really there and what he's there to do. So overall, like I say, I did enjoy this one. It wasn't quite as good as the first book in the Kings of Italy series, but still a very solid start to the series. Rated at 4 stars, and it was 3 on the spy scale. After that, then I picked up my very first 5-star read of the month, and that was Our Thing by Nicci Harris. And this is another mafia romance, and this one is book 1 of the Kids of the District series. It's a mafia romance set in Australia, and it's also part 1 of a duet. So this does end on a bit of a cliffhanger, but it is a happy for now. So like I said, this is a mafia romance, and it's a mafia romance between a young ballet dancer and what is essentially the enforcer for this Australian mafia. So what we have here is a very damaged, obsessed, possessive hero with very much toucher and die vibes. He is very, very grumpy. He really doesn't like anyone, it seems, apart from her. And we were following Max Butcher and Cassidy. Like I said, Max has very much got this reputation of being very, very grumpy. Everyone is afraid of him. He isn't very friendly. He doesn't treat women very well. He's kind of a, you know, he's happy to spend the night with a woman, but that is as far as it goes. Meanwhile, Cassidy is a very, very sweet, empathetic young woman. She's a very talented ballerina who works really, really hard, and her complete passion is ballet. And she's always had a bit of a secret crush on Max Butcher, because when they were young, he actually stepped in when her brother was being bullied by another child, and Max kind of stepped in and rescued him. And ever since then, she's kind of had like this hero worship for Max, and like I say, has secretly had this crush on him. But he doesn't seem to remember who she is, definitely hasn't paid too much attention to her. And shortly after she turns 18, he starts to notice her. She's starting to hang around at the same sort of parties, going to the same sort of places, and they have a couple of encounters where they start to interact with one another. And he is still very brusque and grumpy with her, but also shows a softer side, and he starts to really, like I say, really notice her, and secretly becomes very kind of obsessed and possessive over her. But he knows he needs to protect her as well, because it wouldn't do for anyone to know he has feelings for her, because obviously he's in a very difficult position in the mafia, and he doesn't want anyone to be able to use her as leverage over him. So he does very much try and keep his emotions in check and tries to hide the way he feels about her, but this is going to become increasingly difficult for him him as the story progresses, because they are going to get close and they are going to start a relationship with one another. Now, I absolutely loved Max's character. He was absolute perfection. He really, really was. He was the perfect blend of sort of grumpy, possessive, kind of jealous sort of character who doesn't like anyone but her, but also had that like amazing sweet side. He would do anything for her. He was super protective of her, really, really sweet and kind of romantic in so many ways. And so I felt that Nicci Harris pulled this off and did it so well, where you never kind of hated him. He was never overly obnoxious. He never really bullied or picked on our heroine. He was never cruel to her, but he still maintained that kind of grumpiness, that kind of scary persona that we really, really love about a dark hero, but was so soft and sweet for her. And I just absolutely loved everything about him. He was absolutely fantastic. He really was. Now, alongside their romance, there's kind of a lot of intrigue going on. There's a lot going on between his family, who is connected to the mafia, the actual head of the mafia, who is called Jimmy. There's definitely something going on with him. Things aren't quite as they seem. Kresley has also got a brother who is actually kind of adopted into the family, and he is also connected to these mafia families in some way, and we start to uncover that and learn a little bit more. And Jimmy definitely wants to draw Kresley into the family, has spotted how much Max really does care for her and really encourages that connection so that he can absolutely use her as leverage. So this first book, like I said, does end on a cliffhanger. Things don't go so well for Kresley at the end of this book, and Max is furious about what happens. Still, this does end on a happy finale for this couple, and so their romance is never in question, their relationship is never in question. And again, another thing that I absolutely loved about this was how much Kresley loved Max, and she was absolutely steadfast and loyal in her opinion about him. She could not be swayed. She knew that he did bad things, but that he was a good person inside, and she never once wavered from her loyalty and love towards Max, which was another thing that I really, really liked about this book. So like I say, absolutely loved it, rated it 5 stars, and it was 3.5 on the Spy scale. So then of course I went straight on to read book 2 in this duet, which is Cosa Nostra. This is also book 2 then of Kids of the District. Again, I absolutely love this one, rated it 5 stars, and it was 3.5 on the Spy scale. I'm not going to talk too much about what happens in this book because I don't want to spoil anything. Like I say, book 1 did end on a cliffhanger, and as we move into book 2, it very much continues from the moment we left off, with Max very much trying to protect Cassidy, help her through some trauma that she experienced at the end of the first book, and then kind of work out how they were going to be together, because there's more plot twists and turns in this one. They've got some enemies that they need to kind of vanquish, and also there is a point in time when Max and Cassidy get separated from each other, and it is absolutely gut-wrenching to read. So I will say that this is a very emotional second part of this duet. I absolutely fell in love with this couple, was devastated for them when they had a period of time when they couldn't be together, and I'm not ashamed to say that I did in fact cry at this one when I was reading this one. But it was absolutely fantastic, loved every minute of it, and definitely will be going on to read more books in this series. The other thing I want to say is that in book 1 we only get Cassidy's POV, so the whole story is told from her POV, but in this one we start to get chapters from Max's POV as well, and I think that was absolute perfection as well, because we can finally get to see inside his head what he was thinking and how much he truly did love Cassidy. So overall, highly recommend. Whether or not you're a mafia romance lover, it was an absolutely fantastic romance. So from there I went on to read Twisted Bonds by Cora Reilly. This is book 4 in the Camorra Chronicles, and it's another mafia romance set in Las Vegas, and we were following Chiara and Nino. In fact, this is the second book that features Chiara and Nino, because their main book, which was Twisted Emotions, was book 2 in this series, and so this book, book 4, very much finishes off their story, but also overlaps with the events of book 3 as well. So that's the one thing I will say about this one. You do absolutely need to read books 2 and 3 of the Camorra Chronicles as an absolute minimum before you read this book, because otherwise there's going to be parts of this story that kind of don't necessarily make sense, and you're not really going to be sure where these characters are coming from. Of course, as we're dealing with Kiara and Nina, we're very much dealing with a damaged heroine, a very possessive hero who's also a psychopath, and a surprise baby in this one. Now, I enjoyed book 2 in this series. I enjoyed Nina and Kiara's story, but one of the things I commented on at the time when I read that book was that I didn't feel we got enough of Nino. The kind of book ends at a point in time where Nino fully hasn't embraced his new self. We know there's much more for us to explore with Nino's character growth and where he's gonna kind of end up in the future. And this book very much does continue that story. However, overall, this was the weakest of the series so far. I rated 3.5 stars and it was 2.5 on the spy scale. The main reason that I didn't love this one was because of the way the story was told. Like I said, it very much overlapped with the events of book 3, and I felt therefore that quite a lot of the chapters were quite skippy, so they kind of flicked around quite a lot. So you really did have to have read book 3 to kind of understand what was going on, and if you hadn't, it would have been very confusing to kind of follow, because what we're actually seeing is how Kiara is reacting to the fact that Serafina has been kidnapped by Reno. She's now living with them in their house, but the two women don't really interact with each other that much, so we get quite a lot of little pieces of story where Kiara is hearing that Serafina is coming. She knows something is going on. She kind of meets her a couple of times, but we don't really get the full picture, and therefore, like I said, it felt quite skippy, and it was almost like filling in the blanks, if you like, of what we didn't know had happened. Also, there's other stuff going on with the family as well, and the 2 other brothers, and Kiara is also really struggling with the fact that she is very much wanting to have a baby. She's trying to get pregnant, but her and Nino have not yet successfully gotten pregnant, and so she is dealing with some anxiety about that as well. So while I absolutely love to be in this world, I really do love these characters and this world that Cora Reilly has created. Very often I'm feeling left a little bit disappointed by her stories. I've come to realise that I'm not a massive fan of her writing style. Even though these books aren't particularly long, I always feel that they take me a long time to get through. And while I actually enjoy the stories, I really like these characters. They feel very comfortable to me. Also, there's something about it where I'm not completely obsessed, I'm not completely addicted. And at times I really could have just put this book down and not picked it up again. Anyway, I wouldn't rule out reading any more of Cora Reilly's, but I feel like I have reached the peak in terms of her storytelling, because I know based on other people's feedback that Twisted Pride was the absolute height of her writing and popularity, and the books that she's written since have not been as popular. Now, I really wanted to read Twisted Bonds to finish off Kiara and Nino's story, and I'm so glad I did, but like I said, it wasn't my favourite in the series, and I don't feel compelled at this point to carry on reading anymore. So next up, I picked up Long Live the King by Khai Hara. This is book 1 in the Royal Crown Academy, and I picked this one up because I pulled it from my jar and it was recommended by Vanessa5641. So thank you so much for the recommendation. In fact, she didn't actually recommend this first book in the series, she recommended the second book in the series, but I wanted to read these in order because I was very intrigued by this series. Now, this is a dark romance and it's set in Switzerland. In fact, it's set in a boarding school in Switzerland, and the characters in this one are 18, they're in their final year of high school. We are dealing very much with an enemies to lovers situation because our hero, who is called Rogue, is very much a bully, and he very much bullies our heroine, who is Bellamy. Now, Rogue comes from a very wealthy family. In fact, it's his family that have funded this boarding school for many generations, and so he pretty much feels like he runs the school and owns the school. So pretty much what he says goes, and he's got quite a large following of people who will pretty much do anything he says. Our heroine, on the other hand, Bellamy, she is from a poorer family. She's from the United States of America, and her dream is to finish high school, get a scholarship to a really good university, be able to get a good job, and buy a house for her mum. And that is very much her focus and her drive and what she wants to do. Now, in her kind of junior year, if you like, she hears about this scholarship at a boarding school and she can apply to go, and she thinks if she gets this scholarship to this boarding school in Switzerland, then that will absolutely help her massively with her applications to the university she wants to go to. And so she is puts all in basically in terms of this application. And she actually happens to apply with her best friend, and they both managed to get a spot at this school. And so she's super excited to go. It's one opportunity, to experience something different. It's a fantastic opportunity to be in a new country, but also she is totally focused on her academics and really wants to do well. Unfortunately for her though, on day one she makes an enemy out of Rogue. She happens to be coming out of a coffee shop with a milkshake. She bumps into him, the milkshake goes all over him, and as a result of that he decides henceforth that he's going to make her life an absolute misery with the goal of kicking her out of school. Of course, she is so desperate and determined to be there that she's going to put up with anything he throws her way, and she's not going to give in. And so, like I said, this becomes very much an enemies to lovers situation. Now, he gets an opportunity to kind of give her an ultimatum, kind of blackmail her a little bit, because she gets into trouble at school. It's completely his fault, but she ends up with detention, and this incident is going to go on her record. Now, he happens to be in detention with her as well, but he does her a deal and says, hey, you know, I pretty much run the school. I can talk to the head of the school. We can get your record expunged, but in return, you are going to be at my beck and call for the next 6 weeks. And so very reluctantly she agrees, and then she ends up being his beck and call girl for the next 6 weeks. What's going to actually happen, of course, is that he's going to spend more time with her, and he's going to start to develop feelings for her, and his attitude is very much going to start to change, and their relationship goes from there. Now, I really enjoyed the story. I thought it was a great start to this series. In fact, I may be wrong, but I think this was the author's debut novel, and I really did enjoy it. Very intrigued to read more about the other characters in this series. And in fact, what I thought was that it had a very, very similar storyline as the Wallflower and the Wildflower, because we're very much dealing with a bully, but also a hero who's very abused by his father. He's also in a situation where something has happened with his mother, and his father is definitely using the memory of his mother as leverage over him, and we know it's kind of a twisty-turny plot. And also the scenario where he has to pretend to his father that he really doesn't like Bellamy in order to protect her, so that his father can't use her as leverage against him either. However, where the Wallflower and the Wildflower took 2 books and about 900 pages to tell that tale, this book was told with one story in about 350 pages. So all in all, I did really enjoy this one. We'll be continuing on with this series when I get the chance, and I rated it 4 stars, and it was 3 on the spy scale. Next up, I picked up Crossing the Lines by S.J. Hooks. This is a standalone, and it was recommended by Christine Any Ally 5008, so thank you so much. This was another one I picked from the jar last month. This is kind of a billionaire erotic romance. It's an age gap. We have some kink in this one, caretaking, close proximity. We're dealing very much with a damaged hero. This couple become housemates. They enter into a sex deal. The hero is actually scarred. We're dealing with a single mum, and it has taboo elements as well. So a lot of tropes in this particular one. The characters we're following are Abigail and Simon, or as she calls him, Sir or Mr. Thorne. This book very much starts out where Abigail is very much a struggling single mum. Her partner left her about 6 months before. He's just disappeared one day and has not come back, and he's left her in quite a financial difficulty. She has desperately been trying to find work, but she isn't really experienced in anything. It's really struggling to get a job, and as a result she is really struggling financially, and you know, she's behind on her rent, she's struggling to put food on the table, and she is foregoing her own food in order to feed her son. So one night she gets really desperate, and she goes to a strip club to see if she can find work as a stripper. However, when she goes for kind of an interview, they tell her that she's far too skinny and to fatten herself up before she comes back. Of course, the only reason she's skinny is because she hasn't eaten for quite some time, And as she's leaving this strip club, very down and despondent, she happens to bump into our hero. Now he kind of follows her down the street and offers to give her money in exchange for a blowjob. And so she has never done anything like this before, but she's so desperate at this point, she kind of agrees to get in the car with him, and he drives her to this kind of secluded place. When they get there, it's very, very obvious to Mr. Thorne that she is scared. She's never done this before. She really doesn't want to do it. She seems very reluctant, and he's not the kind of man that would force her into doing anything. He also realises just how hungry she is, so puts the car into drive and takes her to get some food. Now, as he goes to drop her off, he asks if he can see her again. He sees something in her that he really likes, and he said, "Things didn't quite work out as I expected tonight, but how would you like to come to my house later in the week? I will pay you $500 and you know, we'll go from there." So she agrees, and they kind of enter into this sex deal where he will pay her to come and visit him a couple of times a week. Now it turns out that he has very much got a kink. He is sort of a dominant looking for a sub, but it's sort of more than that. He's really kind of has this sort of 1950s housewife kind of fantasy. So when she comes over, he gets her dressed into kind of a 1950s style outfit, and she will cook for him, she will bake for him, she will serve him, and he really is looking for someone to absolutely worship him, but not only to do it because he's paying her to, but he really wants her to want to be submissive towards him, really wants her to worship him, really wants her to take care of him. So they do enter into this sort of relationship. Now the more she goes to visit him and the more she takes care of him, the more she actually does fall in love with him. And she really doesn't know what to do with her emotions, because he's made it clear from the start that this is just an arrangement between them. He doesn't want anything kind of emotional or kind of long term, but still they definitely have a bond, and it becomes very, very clear that they develop this very intense sort of bond between them. Now, eventually he offers to make this arrangement permanent, and he said, "Why don't you just move in with me, because that'll be so much better and we can have this permanent arrangement." And she kind of freaks out, because this whole time she's been hiding the fact that she's got a son from him. She's never told him that she's a mother, and she's like, these two worlds cannot meet. You know, when I'm with my son, I'm a mother, and that is very different from what he expects of me. But he is so determined that he wants to be with her that he kind of goes to her house. When he gets there, he sees that she's got a son, but also that literally that same night her apartment has been burgled, all of her money is gone, the place has been ransacked, and he's like, "Look, you cannot stay here. I really want to take care of you. It's fine to bring your son, and we'll reset some boundaries. You can say that you're my housekeeper. I'll pay you a monthly fee. I'll pay to send your child to a private school, and you can do whatever you want during the day, as long as I have you between the hours of 9 p.m. and 12 a.m. And so she agrees to this. And now, of course, a child is living with him in his house, and they do start to get close as a family, but he is completely freaked out by this, and this is then causes another rift between them. So I won't say any too more about that, other than the fact that we start to uncover why Mr. Thorne is the way he is, why he's seeking this kind of relationship, and why he's starting to get very scared about his emotions, not only for our heroine but also for her son as well. But I absolutely love this one. It started off quite strange. This Mr. Thorne comes across as kind of very strange and unusual to start off with, but the more we find out about him, the more we really warm to him, and we really are rooting for him to be able to get through his issues and find his way back to Abigail. And I really enjoyed this one, rated it 4.5 stars, and it was very kinky as well, rated it 4 on the spy scale. So next up then we have Forever Your Rogue by Erin Langston. This one is a historical romance. It's also a standalone. I believe this is the author's debut novel, and it isn't part of a series specifically. However, some of the characters from this book do appear in some of her other books as well. This particular one has a couple of tropes. We've got close proximity, fake dating, friends to lovers, repaying a debt, and a single mum to 2 children. We were following Cora, who is Lady Dane, and Nate Travers. So in this one, Cora is a lady. In fact, she is a viscountess, but her husband has recently passed away. Now, there was no love between her and her husband. It was very much an arranged marriage, but she had always had hope that they would fall in love with each other through their marriage. However, her ex-husband was very cold towards her, very unfeeling, actually had loads of mistresses on the side, never intended to fall in love with his wife. And in addition to that, although she'd given him 2 beautiful children, her husband also had no interest in the children either, particularly the daughter. And so her whole world is her children. She absolutely loves them. And to other people in the ton, maybe brings up her children a little bit inappropriately because she only has one nanny and she does a lot of the caretaking and the child rearing herself because she just loves her children so much. She just wants to spend all her time with them. So people say that she cuddles them, that they are not very well behaved, that she hasn't instilled proper manners in them. And this is going to come back to bite her a little bit because after her husband passes away, he actually leaves the guardianship of her children to his sister and husband, and now she is in a battle really for custody of her own children. And this is where Nate Travers comes in, because Nate is an old childhood friend. She once saved Nate and therefore he owes her a bit of a debt, but Nate is a bit of a rogue. He's never settled down. He is a bit of a gambler, does a lot of drinking, is known to be with a lot of women, and he's found himself even to the point where his own brother has now disowned him. And although he is technically will be a lord one day, he's kind of in line to be the lord, his brother has kind of disowned him and taken access to his money away from him because he's really trying to stop him from gambling every penny he has. So Nate's in a bit of a financial spot. Cora knows this and she asked Nate for a favour. She was like, hey, I will pay you to be my fake fiance, because what she's hoping is that if she can get herself another husband, this will be enough in order to get the courts to agree that she can keep her own children. And so Nate agrees to go with her to her summer residence in Berkshire, spend some time with her and her children, and also the sister-in-law and the husband. Now the sister-in-law and her husband are really, really not nice people. They're so uppity. They talk down to Cora. They're really, really rude about her and the way she's brought up the kids. And it's very, very obvious that they've got kind of no feelings towards the children at all, but they want to take the kids off her. Mainly, we come to learn because they definitely want some stake in the house and the Viscount title, and perhaps some of her son's money as well, because her son has inherited the title and the money, but of course he's currently too young to do anything about that. And so with this aunt and uncle, as it were, being his guardians, they've got access to the money, and it becomes quite apparent quite quickly that they have no interest in the children whatsoever, but they do have a very big interest in his estate. And so Nate is very much drawn into this scenario. He is not too happy about it at first, but he kind of doesn't feel really he has a choice. He isn't that great with children either, but Cora's children definitely win him over because they are so sweet and so cute and they like to play, and he's a big kid at heart, and so he really kind of not only starts to care quite deeply for Cora but for her children as well. And it's great to see how his character arc develops from this very roguish man to someone who is going to very much step up and take responsibility for this family. So overall, I did enjoy this one. However, historicals really aren't my thing. I don't really like the language. I don't really like the pomp and ceremony that comes with a historical romance and all the pearl clutching that kind of goes on in these kinds of stories. So while it was a great historical romance, I think it was an interesting plot. I really liked the character development. The romance was strong in this one. However, it wasn't quite for me, and therefore I ended up rating this one 4 stars and gave it 2.5 on the spice scale. Next up, I picked up By the Letter by Julia Wolfe, and this is book 2 in the Mile High Billionaires series. This is a contemporary romance with a billionaire, and it's close proximity, enemies to lovers, found family, hidden identity, one night stand, sex club, and a surprise baby. And we are following Roman and Shira. Now, before I tell you what this is about, just a little fun fact. I actually applied for an ARC of this one and was accepted for the ARC, and was so excited when I got the link to download this book. However, I was away for work at the time, didn't download it straight away, and by the time I came back, the link had expired and I wasn't actually able to download this ARC. So I was absolutely devastated that I wasn't able to read it in advance. Still, I downloaded it the moment it came out because it came out, I believe it was the 20th of February, and I read it as absolutely as soon as I could. But it's definitely a lesson I learned. So top tip for you as well, make sure that if you get a link to an ARC via BookFunnel, that you don't miss the deadline to actually download it like I did. So definitely lesson learned from me, and I won't be doing that again, hopefully. Fingers crossed. Anyway, like I said, we're following Roman and Shira. Now, Shira is such a sweet, shy, wonderful woman, but because she's so shy and she really has a lot of anxiety around socializing and speaking to people, she can come across as kind of quite cold and dismissive, although she really isn't. Now, Shira's backstory is that she ended up marrying this much older man who was also a billionaire, and she married him when I think she was only 19 or 20. As a result, everyone thinks that she is a gold digger because she married this man who was so much older than her and was so wealthy. Now, he's recently passed away. They were only married for about 10 years, so she's now in her late 20s, and he's recently passed away, so she's been left, you know, quite a lot of his money. She's now living in his house, and in addition to that, he promised that she would also run his company, so she's now CEO of this company. However, this company's not been doing well for a number of years, and since she's taken over, she's been trying desperately to try and save it, but it's really not doing well, and it's going downhill fast. So enter our hero in this one, Roman, who is a extremely wealthy businessman, and it's his job to buy up kind of failing companies or to get a stake in failing companies, see if he can rejuvenate them, and if he can't, he kind of sells off the assets to kind of get his investment back. Now, his connection to this particular firm is that her husband, her late husband, was kind of his mentor, or he believed that he was his mentor, and also he's fairly close friends with this man's daughter, which is basically Shira's stepdaughter. Now, there's not many years between them, and the stepdaughter absolutely hates Shira, and so she's told Roman all kinds of terrible stories about how much of a gold digger she is, how she cut her out of her father's life, how she kicked her out of the house and has not let her have anything since her father's death. And so Roman definitely starts out with a bad impression of Shira, and he doesn't really form his own opinions about this. He just takes that at face value, and as a result, when he first meets Shira, and she is like I said, comes across as quite cold and dismissive and uncaring, he starts to get really angry and engineers it so he's able to take over the company and remove her from her role as CEO. However, while all this is going on, this is not the first time they've met each other, because right at the very start of this book, they actually meet each other on a one-night stand in a sex club. Now, Shira, because she's so shy and really anxious about saying what she wants, she has a fantasy where a man will have free use of her. She doesn't have to tell him anything. He'll just do whatever he wants, make all her fantasies come true, and then he'll kind of leave. And she doesn't really have to, you know, ask for what she wants, basically, because the man is going to take complete control. And so she kind of has this one-night encounter at this sex club where both herself and her partner is wearing a mask, so they don't see what each other looks like, but they have this amazing night together. Now, during the session, if you like, one of the condoms they're using splits, and so he basically says to her, if the worst should happen, I will leave my name and number at the front desk so you can get in touch with me. So please reach out. If anything happens, reach out, get in touch with me, and we will figure something out. After this, of course, this is where all this stuff starts kicking off with her and Roman and her business, but she also discovers 2 months later that she is pregnant. So she reaches back out to this sex club, leaves a message for him. He gets this message and then they both then realise that he is the father of her child. And of course, now this is going to be very awkward for both of them. However, this is where things start to change and we really start to see who Roman really is as a person. And where we thought he was not a great guy at all, we realise just how wonderful he is, because once he finds out he's going to be a father, he is all in. He very much shows how caring he is. He moves in next door to Shira, he sets up a nursery, he wants to be part of all of the doctor's appointments, wants to really make sure she's taken care of and she's well looked after, and starts to really get to know her as a person. And then he starts to realise all the things he believed about her were just not true at all. And then he has to start quite a big grovel in order to, you know, get her to forgive him, and also for them to really start to move forward with at first what is a friendship, which turns into a sexual relationship and ultimately a long-term relationship as well. So overall, I really enjoyed this one. I always enjoy a Julia Wolf. This one was no exception. Rated it 4.5 stars and it was 3 on the Spy scale. Next up, I finished Twisted Games by Anna Huang. This was book 2 in the Twisted series, and I picked this one up from a prompt card because it says to pick up a book that had gone viral on TikTok. And while this particular one hadn't, I know Anna Huang did at the start of her career go viral, and I really wanted to continue with this series because I'd only read book 1 in this particular series. This particular one is a contemporary romance. It's basically a princess of a European country called Eldora, that's Bridget, and her bodyguard. So it's a bodyguard romance as well. They have about a 10-year age gap between them, but of course, because he's her bodyguard, they're in close proximity together. So it's pretty forbidden as well, but he is a very possessive, protective hero, as you can imagine, not only because of his job, but because of how much he cares about her as well. We were following, like I say, Princess Bridget and Reese, but they call each other Mr. Larson and Princess, which I thought was really cute. Now, I read this one as an audiobook and it was narrated by Aidan Snow and Cindy Kay, and I thought it was really well narrated as well. So this is the quintessential bodyguard story. She is a princess of Eldora, but she's only kind of second in line to the throne. It's actually her brother who's due to take over when their grandfather passes away. So she never expects that she is ever going to be the queen. Therefore, she's got quite a bit of latitude to live where she wants, and she's chosen to live in the USA. Now, Reese has been her bodyguard for about 2 years, and when they first met each other, they really didn't hit it off at all because Mr. Larson is very much a stickler for security. Obviously, that is his job, and he thought that she is a little bit too slack with her security procedures and definitely wanted her to follow his instructions a little bit more closely than maybe she did her previous bodyguard. So they don't get off on a great foot, but of course they are together for a long time, living pretty much with each other for 2 years, and over time they do form this friendship, and he does a lot of sweet things for her, and you know, takes care of her, and they have a lot of sort of intimate moments with each other. But still, nothing untoward happens between them. They all keep it very professional until the point in time when her granddad gets sick and is taken to hospital. She has to fly back to her home country, which is Eldora, and while there, her brother gives her some terrible news for her because he is actually falling in love with a commoner, which is against the rules. Because he's kind of a prince who's going to become the king, he is supposed to marry someone of noble birth, and because he's so in love with this woman that he's met, he abdicates from the throne. And this means that Bridget is then next in line for the throne, and also this is going to happen quite soon, right, because her granddad is now quite sick, and her granddad ends up stepping aside and she has to then step up as queen. So she is put into this very difficult situation because she's never trained to be the queen, she was never expecting to be the queen, and she cannot let her country down. But there's a lot of things she needs to do. She needs to start going to queen school, shall we say, learning how to take over the country, to try and win over, you know, the citizens of this country, but also has got some political things that she needs to deal with as well. Now, she's got about a 4-week period before they're going to announce that this is going to happen, so she's got some sort of time, and therefore she kind of goes off the rails slightly for a princess because she really wants to live her life as best she can. She knows she's only got 4 weeks to do it before she's put into a gilded cage, as it were, and so she really wants to experience life and have a kind of last hurrah before she ends up having to go back to her home country permanently and step into this new role. So she kind of draws up a bit of a bucket list about some of the things she wants to do, and Reese, when he finds out, he decides he's going to help her. So he takes her to Costa Rica, where they have an amazing kind of week in Costa Rica. They do all the things on her bucket list, like they do something that's high adrenaline, so he takes her down a zip line, she gets to sleep in, she gets to wander around towns when no one knows who she is, and the other thing she wanted was an orgasm from someone that wasn't her, and so Reese also ends up obliging her and taking this final point off her bucket list as well. Of course, they agree that that's just one night, it's going to stay in Costa Rica and they're not going to speak about it again, and then she has to go home to Eldora. Now, she really doesn't want to be without him, so she says to him, come to Eldora with me, continue to be my bodyguard there, and he declines and says, no, you don't need me there, you've got the royal guard. And of course, as soon as she goes home to Eldora, he realises he's made a terrible mistake. He wants to be with her, even if they can't actually be together. He'd rather see her every day and be there to protect her than have no relationship at all. And so he kind of does a bit of a deal with his friend, and he is able then to go back to Eldora and be her bodyguard once more. Of course, now it's going to be much more difficult for them, and they enter into this like clandestine relationship, so it's very, very taboo, and things are going to start to unravel for them when their relationship is finally kind of revealed, when they're kind of found out in terms of what is going on. And like I say, there's lots of political intrigue, lots of stuff going on with the royal family and sort of the political leaders in this country as well. So overall, I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was a real sort of fun time, but I really love this couple and how much they cared about each other and what they were prepared to do in order to make sure that they could end up together. And I really liked how Anna Huang solved that problem for them as well. So overall, I rated this one 4.5 stars, and it was 3 on the Spy scale. Next up, I picked up Unloved by Peyton, Corinne. This is book 2 in the Undone series. This is a sports romance, specifically ice hockey, but it's set in college, and we were following Matt, also known as Freddie, who is our ice hockey star, and Ro. And Ro is the best friend of Sadie, who was the heroine from book 1. So in this one, there's a number of tropes. We were dealing with a damaged hero, friends to lovers, slow burn. There was no third act breakup, and also a tattooed hero as well. So basically our hero in this one, or Matty, or Freddie as they call him, that is his kind of like ice hockey team name. He is a bit of a rogue, he's a bit of a ladies man, but he's like this very much because he thinks the only value that he's got is his body. He's very good at ice hockey and he's very good at pleasing women, and so that is where he thinks his value is, and therefore he really kind of plays into this. He really leans into this part of his character and really plays up to it, and he pretends that he's very carefree, hasn't got a care in the world, but really underneath it he is very, very kind of lonely. He's very starved for affection, and he really wants someone to see him for who he really is and love him for who he really is, not just what he can do with his body. And the reason he thinks that he doesn't have anything to offer other than his body is because he not only has ADHD, but he also has dyslexia and another condition called dyscalculia, which means that he really both struggles with words and also numbers as well. And so he's really, really struggling academically. He's barely making the grades, but he's determined to graduate. Now, people do actually quiz him and say, why are you even bothering to graduate? You could actually turn professional right now. You've got a contract with Dallas. They will take you right now. You don't even have to finish school. But he is absolutely determined to finish university because he really, really wants to prove, not only to himself, but to other people, that he's more than just his skill at ice hockey. And this is where Ro comes in, because Ro is a tutor and she is enlisted to be his tutor for his final year and help him pass 2 classes in particular, maths and biology. And so she really kind of studies and researches not only dyslexia but dyscalculia, and how she's going to help him overcome his learning difficulties and help him to really progress at school and improve his grades. And through this, obviously, they're going to build a very strong connection with each other, build a great friendship, and ultimately it's going to turn into more. Outside of Freddie's problems, Ro has got her own issues as well, because she is a very caring, very loving sort of person, but also quite soft and easily manipulated. And she has had a long-term sort of on again off boyfriend called Tyler. He doesn't treat her very well at all. He very, very much gaslights her, and when he does something wrong, he always turns it back on her to say that she's like overreacting, she needs to grow up, and all of those sorts of things. So a real sort of horrible guy, a real gaslighter. And so this is going to be kind of like the issue with her and Freddie's relationship, because Tyler is still sort of on the scene. She still kind of cares for Tyler, but knows that they shouldn't really be together. And Tyler is not going to let her go very easily, and is really spends a lot of time harassing her, belittling her, and also claiming to want her back. So he's going to be a bit of a spanner in the works for them, because not only is he an issue from her personal relationship, but he is able to get in the way of their academic relationships as well. So a lot going on in this book, but I absolutely loved it. What I like about Peyton Corinne, because I really enjoyed the first book as well, is how emotionally deep these books are. The characters have a lot going on. a lot of issues to work through, but Freddie was such a great character, and he was so nice to Ro, and Ro really saw him for who he was, and she really stuck up for him, and at no point did she ever think badly about him at all, and they were just absolutely the perfect match. So really enjoyed this romance, would highly recommend. I rated it 4.5 stars, and it was 3 on the spice scale. Okay, last one for today, and we've got Lights Out by Navessa Allen. I pulled this one from the booktuber jar, and this was recommended by Christy Reads a Lot, although quite a few booktubers have read this one and did really enjoy it. I enjoyed it too. It's book 1 of the Into Darkness series. It's a dark romance, but it also walks the line of being a bit of a rom-com as well. But essentially this is a stalker romance with a masked man. The heroine in this one definitely has a masked man kink, but we are definitely dealing with some damaged characters in this one who have been through quite a bit of trauma in the past. So we're dealing with a hidden identity as well, which you'd expect with a man in a mask. It's mafia adjacent, there was no third act breakup, and of course we have a stalker hero in this one, so he's very obsessed, very possessive, and very much gives off touch her and die vibes. And we were following Ali and Josh. So Ali is a trauma nurse. She's seen a lot of stuff in the hospital, shall we say, a lot of very traumatic things that she's witnessed at the hospital. She's absolutely dedicated to the cause. She works very long hours, and as a result she's kind of struggled to have a boyfriend really, because she's worked so much that she doesn't have a lot of time for a romance, but she definitely enjoys physical relationships when she has time. Now she has a fetish for men in masks, and in particular she's been following one particular individual on social media who always kind of does thirst trap videos of him wearing a mask and, you know, showing off his amazing body and everything, and she really likes this guy, and she's been leaving lots of comments on his videos about all the things that she wants him to do to her, because she definitely has this man in a mask fantasy where she wants him to break into her house and be there in her bedroom when she gets home and that sort of thing. Now our man in the mask happens to be our hero in this one, Josh, who also happens to be the roommate of one of her ex hookups. One night she text messages Josh's roommate to say, hey, how would you like to hook up tonight? And he's like, really? You're contacting me now? It's been 2 months since you've contacted me, and I'm sorry, I've moved on, I've got a new girlfriend. And she says, oh shit, really, has it been 2 months? And she realises it has, because that's how much she's been working. And so she goes, oh sorry, never mind, carry on as you were. But the roommate happens to show Josh this text message, and when Josh sees this text message, he's amused, because what she's actually put in the text message is, how about you don a mask and come over, something like this, and has actually taken a screenshot of Josh in his social media. So now Josh is really amused, and he decides to kind of track Ali down. Because what we learn about Josh is he is this man in the mask, but he's also quite reclusive, and one of the reasons why he wants to hide his face is because he wants to hide his identity. Because what we discover is that his father is a very infamous serial killer who was caught and unalived, but he is the spitting image of his father. So every time he goes out, he feels really awkward because people recognise him and kind of know who he is. And so he's a bit of a recluse, like I say, likes to wear this mask. In addition to that, his job is actually cybersecurity. So he is a professional hacker, and he's paid a lot of money by companies to kind of like hack into their systems and also set up security into their systems as well. And so he uses his skills as a hacker to figure out which of his subscribers, which of his followers is Ali, looks at all of her comments and decides to see if she really means what she's put in the comments or if it's all just for show. And so he decides he's going to break into her house, make a video on her bed, and then post it. And when she realizes that he's been in her bedroom, obviously then things are going to start to happen for this couple, because he is very much all in on the stalking, and she is desperate to find out who he is, how he knows what she's doing all the time, because he's watching her and he's listening to what she says. And then they start this interaction where they start sending text messages to each other and eventually start this physical relationship as well. Of course, she's desperate to figure out who he is, and she isn't stupid, which I really appreciated about this book, because sometimes, you know, people are wearing masks, they don't recognise each other. But she pretty much figures out it's Josh pretty quickly, but he won't admit it. So then they kind of have this sort of cat and mouse game where she's trying to prove that it really is him, even though she knows it is the whole time. The other thing that I really liked about this book is that you would think that their story would kind of start and end with him being her stalker and then falling in love, but actually there's a lot more to this plot, and in the second half of this book something happens that really then kicks off a whole new chain of events, but very much lives up to the slogan for this book, which is the couple who stay together stay together. So overall I really enjoyed this one, rated it 4.5 stars. It was 4 on the spy scale because there was some kinky activities in this one as well. But what I really liked about it was how it really towed the line, like I said at the start, between it being a dark romance but it also being quite humorous in a lot of places, but not so funny that it kind of like felt very slapstick and not serious at all. You still very much felt that it was like dark. Some bad things did happen in this story. There was some dark content that we kind of had to get through, but equally I just loved how fun their relationship was, how much fun they had together. So overall, like I say, really enjoyed this one. It was a great recommendation, and if you haven't read it yet, I definitely recommend you give it a go. Okay, so there we go, that is it. I think this will be another long video. Despite only reading 13 books, I always manage to talk way too long. So if you made it to the end, thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it and sticking with me to the end. As always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content from me, and all it's left for me to do is thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Did I say it was a historical? Next up I caught Peyton, and also very similar sort of ending where he has to kind of break up with his girlfriend in order to protect her, and also that kind of scenario where he has to pretend to dislike Bellamy so that his father isn't, and also that sort of scenario where he has to be he decides from thenceforth he is going to, he's really angry with her because no. Okay, so let's get straight into the first book that I finished in the month of February, which was The What? Just check that I look okay one more time.